Hi, I'm Rob Shaver, and this is Spark to Flame, where I bring you ideas, insights, and inspiration for better marriages. Last month, I was able to watch most of the first season of a Showtime documentary series called Couples Therapy. You get to be a fly on the wall in a real-life counseling situation where a doctor is dealing with patients, clients who are sharing their lives, who are sharing their legitimate problems, and seeing how a counselor interacts with them. Now, I would recommend the series in that way if you're thinking about maybe getting help and going to see a counselor. It gives you a glimpse into what that might look like. A lot of people have stigmas or apprehension about going to see someone to get help. But when you see the process actually enacted and lived out, then I think that especially the way that this doctor performs, it'd be very comforting and easing to go into that. Now, I wrote more about her and her ability to be an active listener in a blog that I've started. And you can go to sparktoflame.us to read about that and some of the other things I've written, again, for the sake of helping people's marriages. In today's video, though, I'm going to look at the same series of shows, Couples Therapy, and highlight one of the common things that I saw in the couples as they presented their issues. Now, it wasn't that the issue itself, the specifics were the same, but there was overarching themes of patterns and cycles. And so that's what today's video is going to be about, vicious cycles. So I'm going to highlight what does a vicious cycle look like using the clients from the show Couples Therapy, how you can identify it in your own marriage, and then a couple of things you can do if you know that you do have a vicious cycle or a bad pattern that's happening in your marriage. So today we're talking about vicious cycles. First, what exactly is a vicious cycle? Well, essentially it's someone does something. Now that could be something that is inherently negative and meant to be negative, or it could be just something that is perceived to be negative. The other person in the relationship then processes this thing, and instead of stopping it there or doing something positive or doing something to stop a cycle from starting, they respond in a negative way. This triggers the initial person, the initial actor or speaker, to then also respond in a negative way. And then, as you can see, negative to negative to negative to negative, things continue to spiral down until finally things get really bad, right? There's some kind of flare up of violence or words spoken that are so hurtful that it makes somebody walk away in pain, or that they realize that they've gone too far, or that they throw their hands up and say, I can't do this. Like, this is enough. These patterns can happen in two different ways. It can happen in a micro way, like this was just one conversation. I belittle you, and then you insult me, and then I make fun of you, and that can kind of spiral downward in just a mere conversation. But also those patterns can be consistent. It could be that every week I go out and I do something, and when I come home, you're upset about it, and then I respond a certain way, and then you respond a certain way, and then that's over. But it's not just an isolated vicious cycle. The next week, the same thing happens. And the week after that, the same thing happens. So you might be thinking, oh yeah, I automatically, right away, I definitely have something like this in my marriage. And so that's not good. It's bad. That's why people get help. I'm going to highlight a couple of the instances from couples therapy where this came out. So in one, there was a situation where the man and his wife, they were together and he had a job. And this is all just from what they expressed on the show. So he's saying he had a job that required him or allowed him to have lunch with women and get together with women in ways that he thought were perfectly fine, platonic, or for business. And in one instance at least, he shares this information with his wife. Now, she does not take kindly to it, right? She's a little sensitive about it, and not in a bad way sensitive. She's aware of it, and she frowns upon it. She questions him. She gets upset about it. She gets sad about it. He feels like you're making a bigger deal about this than you need to. But she's thinking, you don't need to be having lunch with women that aren't your wife. So they both probably have equally valid points, but they both have their points. But there is a result in how they respond to each other. So he shares his truth. She reacts in what he perceives as a negative way. His response in this kind of vicious cycle is kind of an ongoing thing, is he responds by continuing his behavior, but limiting his communication. So the next time he comes home and she'll say something like, how was lunch? Who did you have lunch with? And he'll say something like, oh, it was no big deal. I just brought something from home. So he's either not telling her all of the truth or flat out lying to her. And she's suspicious. I didn't see you bring anything from home, so you must be lying to me, which makes her dig her heels into the idea that he is in fact doing something wrong, which makes her more suspicious, which makes her react even more, which makes him want to share even less. And so you see how there's a pattern going on here. And eventually this guy was just leaving the house and going out for hours, not telling his wife what he was doing, where he was going, or who he was going to be with. So understandably, she is upset. But the more upset she got, the more distant he got. And this was their vicious cycle that brought them to counseling, to where they both were throwing their hands up saying, like, I don't know what to do. I can't make you happy anymore. I don't know how to make this right. So that's kind of another sign that we can see there. But that was their vicious cycle. And a second couple that was highlighted, their vicious cycle was that the woman, the wife, she liked to be in control of things, and she liked to do things her way. And for 99%, and from his perspective, 99.9% of the time, he complied and he did whatever it was that she wanted to do. But then there was that 0.1% of the time that he just wanted to do his thing. He just didn't want to play her game or watch her show or do that. He just wanted to go do her thing. He just wanted to go do his own thing. His feeling was when he did that, when he broke out of her control, she would flip out. And this would cause him, again, kind of the distance thing, would cause him to want to go even further. So the thing that he would do when he needed that break was he would go and drink. So drinking would make her even more mad, because she would think, not only do I not have control over you, but you don't have control over yourself when you drink like that. Well, this was their cycle, is that he would operate in a certain way and let that mount until he had just had enough. And then he would break out and do the things that would really rile her up. They would really get her going and really upset her. So then that would cause kind of maybe weeks or 2 weeks of reparation where she would not be pleased with his behavior, and she would kind of go into hyper mode of needing to control him. Well, when she goes into hyper mode of trying to make sure that she's got control of things, that puts even more pressure on him, which makes him want to break out even more, right? So their vicious cycle was she would control, he would want to break out of it. So how do they fix that? Now, the last couple I want to talk about is where the male, he wanted his wife to be just a better companion. He wanted for her to be funnier and smarter and things like that. And, he's an interesting guy, but what he does want, he doesn't really know. He doesn't really know what he wants. He just knows that he wants something different. And so since he doesn't know what he wants, he doesn't know how to effectively communicate that to his spouse. And so it comes out always in the form of criticism. So she's doing something, and it's not the wrong thing, but it's not the right thing. And he doesn't know what the right thing is, so he'll just criticize the thing that she's done. Now, she happens to be a people pleaser. And so instead of taking that criticism and getting flustered and walking away or yelling at him or getting mad, she goes back to the drawing board and says, okay, well, that wasn't it. What is it that I can do that will make him happy? And because she really wants to please her husband, who she loves, she tries really hard to find out the things that he would like. But it's a game, and it's a yo-yo, because he will criticize the one thing and say, they made a big deal about one of his birthdays. But for example, it might be, I want something fun. I want something big. I want a big party. And she would plan a big party, except he wouldn't say that. He would insinuate that this is something that was really good, big parties. she would throw him a big party. And he would say, oh, I don't want a big party. I wish you hadn't thrown me that big party. I just wanted to be with you this birthday. So the next year, his birthday would come around, and this would be more of those long-term cycles. And so she'd tell him, well, last year he told me he doesn't want a big party. And so this year I'm going to plan a really romantic night, just he and I, to enjoy his birthday. Well, inevitably, he would be disappointed with that and express his disappointment with criticism and say, I don't know why you thought I would just want to be with you. It's my birthday. I want to party. I want to live it up. And so that was the cycle that they were going through, to which she finally threw her hands up in the air and did say, I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this anymore. All right, so there's good and bad things about all of those. Now let's see how it looks like in your relationship and 3 things that you can do to fix it. All right, so first you want to take stock of your own relationship, and it probably won't take too long to figure if you do have some kind of vicious cycle, but really it's that end that will trigger the clues. But really it's that end kind of final result of frustration. And if you have got that feeling like, I can't do this anymore, that means that your partner is continually having some sort of action or reaction that you really feel like you can't handle anymore. What you need to wake up to when we apply it to our own lives is that in most healthy relationships, it is not just the one person that's at fault, right? They might be doing something that you find insufferable, but you are also doing something to contribute to that, right? So that old adage of it takes 2 to tango is they are reacting, but they're reacting to something that you are doing. So if we kind of backtrack through my examples, that last example, it'd be very easy to watch those videos and watch that show and see like this guy, this man, he is the one at fault, right? He's the bad guy. And I'm not saying that she's the bad guy or even that he is, but just that her actions do contribute to the whole vicious cycle. If she did not continually go back to the drawing board and try to do guesswork at what would make him happy, then he wouldn't continually criticize what she was trying to do. Now, I'm not saying that she was in the wrong. I'm just saying that each of them contributed to a cycle that wasn't getting them anywhere. And so that is how you can identify if you have one of those cycles. Just frustration or feeling like you can't go on anymore in the particular relationship means that you probably have some cycle in which you are participating in a certain way and they are participating in a certain way, and that is consistent. So how do we break out of these cycles? So the first thing that we want to do if we want to have a chance to break out of the cycles is to identify what the cycles and the patterns are. Okay. Now, the way that I would encourage you to do that on your own, if you have the ability, is to actually write it out or even draw it out. Go ahead and make that pattern of I do this and they do this and I do this and they do this. And you can start out with the thing that they do that you don't like. Or here's the thing that they keep doing that I don't like. Write that out. Draw it out in a diagram. Now look at how do you react to it? Or is there something that you do that triggers it? This could just be a bad habit of theirs, but it could also be a vicious cycle. They've got a habit, they've got something they're doing, but there's something that you're doing that's either triggering it or reacting to it that is causing the cycle to keep going. So you're either contributing and spinning the cycle further and faster, or you're just contributing in a way that's allowing it to continue. But either way, a big and important first step is to write it out or draw it out. The second thing that can happen, again, in healthy relationships is mutual submission. Take a look at what that is. Now you've got your diagram, you see exactly what your vicious cycle looks like. Well, usually that has to do with somebody has wants or desires that are unmet, or something is going on along those lines, and someone's not giving in a place that they ought to give in or want to give in. So for the first couple I mentioned, one person has the desire to know what their husband is doing for lunch. The other person has the desire to not get in trouble for having lunch with somebody else. So you're able to identify those. What are ways that both of them could make sacrifices to their ultimate desire so that they could both be happy? Essentially, find the win-win, right, to break out of the cycle. Now, Those two things are easy for me to say, but they're very hard to do when you are in the thick of it. It's hard to see the forest for the trees, right? And so that is where number 3, why did we see all of these things happen in a show called Couples Counseling, is because when we get to these points, we really have a lack of an ability to see for ourselves what we can do to break out of them. The third thing you can do to help yourself break out of a vicious cycle is to get help. Sometimes when we're in the cycle, we don't know it, we don't see it. All we feel is hatred and frustration and anger. And what you need is a third set of eyes to be able to look at your situation. And it is sometimes just blatantly obvious from the outsider's perspective. Oh, here's what's going on. And again, in counseling, they're not going to say, and here's what you need to do. The counselor's job is just to bring light to that. Okay, here is the cycle. Now I'm going to help you to identify what are some things that you could do to stop the cycle or to reverse the cycle, right? It's not about getting advice. It's not about being told what to do. It's about listening to yourself. It's about understanding where you actually are in your relationship and working together to find mutual responses to break out of those things. So you could watch couples therapy for yourself, and you yourselves would be able to diagnose some of what's going on in those relationships. But the way that you help somebody is just to help them see what is actually going on. Right? So we all have friends who give advice, and I'm not suggesting you just go to your girlfriend or call your mother or talk to your boy or whatever to get help with your marriage. I'm talking about getting professional help, someone that's been trained, someone that's licensed, someone that you can trust. Clergy, a lot of pastors and ministers are trained to work with couples to help them work through their problems. And so if you've got a vicious cycle in your life, I would definitely and highly recommend, if you can't work through it on your own, then go and get some professional help. So that's today's spark, and may it turn to flames.